Hello, and welcome to the instructional video for course assessment cycles. This video is brought to you by the Assessment Committee in conjunction with the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. During this video, we're going to be covering several different things, and it shouldn't take too much time, but the central goal is to make sure you are properly oriented with regard to our new course assessment cycle template. It is similar to a template that was introduced in spring of 2024. There's really only like one or two changes that have been made to it, but this video will also explain why that change is happening and what some of the reasoning is behind our additional assessment endeavors that we're going to be continuing as an institution as we move forward. So if we are looking at our official agenda, it reads as follows. We're going to touch very briefly on previous assessment endeavors before introducing the new course assessment cycle template, and then hopefully you'll have some time based on this information to begin creating your own course assessment cycle. Now, if we are looking at a specific course or department, for example, one example we're going to cover is the English department. You'll see how all of those are laid out and ultimately how each year needs to look the same. And we'll talk about why that's so important here in a moment. But before we do anything else, we must first address what closing the loop means. As of recording this video, and it's being recorded in October of 2024, we are currently in the process of putting together the interim report for the Higher Learning Commission. In fact, it's been written. We are currently in the process of condensing it so that it meets that 7-page requirement. And one issue that Mount West, and this is not an issue unique to Mount West, it is actually an issue that is experienced by a lot of institutions, is that we are lacking closing the loop data. To define closing the loop, it means utilizing evidence to understand and improve student learning by improving other elements of the assessment cycle. So to elaborate on that, what does that mean? Let's say that you open a loop. To open a loop is to assess a learning outcome or several learning outcomes, in our case going forward, to see where students are succeeding and where there can be some improvements. Let's say that you are using an exam to assess several different outcomes, and initially you provide information about how many students got an A, a B, a C, D, F, etc. That's a good start. However, we dig a little deeper and we find that, let's say 60-70% of students, even students that got an A or a B, really struggled with questions like 16 and 20 on this exam, and they're both about the same general idea. That tells us as instructors that we need to spend a little bit more time in class talking about that subject matter. Maybe we need a class discussion. Maybe we need a bespoke activity dedicated to this one concept or idea. Or maybe we just need to change the way that we are delivering that lecture content. That's where the improvement of the other elements of the assessment cycle comes in. So we are improving what is happening at the course level. What's going on in those individual class sessions, and how do we make it better? The next time that you assess those outcomes, you come back, you're still in that same loop, and you see whether or not you have documented improvements. So you go back to, let's say, that same exam. And you go to those questions 16 and 20, and maybe this time around, about 80-90% actually did really well. They were able to answer that question successfully. If that's the case, you can consider that loop closed. You can move on to the next set of outcomes, the next thing that you want to assess. However, the loop is not officially closed until you have documented success. Now, of course, are you likely to get every student gets a complete 100% every semester? Probably not. We would love that. But while assessment is something that you will continue to do, it is something that is inherently cyclical in nature. We are always improving. In order to officially close that loop, that improvement must be documented. So we know that instructors are doing a lot of work to make their classes better consistently. Of course they are. But when it comes to the data we're missing, that's the part that's missing, is that closing the loop data. We know that instructors are doing what they're supposed to do, but in terms of being able to officially report it, especially to an accrediting body, we really don't have that. And that's for a lot of reasons. And again, most institutions struggle with it. So we are not alone in this. But going forward, we want to make sure that we're really all on the same page. And that begins with understanding what this looks like. So being able to open that loop, begin that assessment, make those changes based on the issues you noticed, and then close that loop when improvements have officially been documented. And to kind of make sure that we were moving in the right track here, in spring of 2024, departments and programs were tasked with completing a course assessment cycle. We all met in person in GO7 to talk about these new templates, and it broke everything down over a course of 5 years. 4 years of assessing, and then a 5th year where you would write a cumulative report. However, when you go back and look at this template in accordance with some of the guidance that was given, the way that it worked was that you would provide one course per year, which, yeah, in terms of divvying up the work, makes sense. We don't want to overwhelm everyone. And believe me, the assessment committee and the assessment co-chairs and the CETL, we are by all means completely sympathetic to the fact that there are going to be some folks going forward who are doing a good bit of assessment. I definitely understand that. However, if we only list one course per year, how are we documenting that there's any kind of improvement in those courses? If I'm teaching English 101, for example, and over a 4-year cycle, I know that I'm assessing English 101 in year 1 and then not again, obviously I'm going to make the course better, right? As an instructor, I'm consistently thinking about that, but I'm not actively formally assessing it in our course assessment form. So how can I formally document it? And then how do we report that to our Higher Learning Commission? How do we foster a culture of assessment if we assess a class only once every 4 years? So that was where a lot of these issues kind of started to pop up when it came to what that consistent kind of assessment was going to look like. Now, in fall of 2024, we are ultimately still using a template that is working in the spirit of the previous one. So we're still on 4 years of assessment, writing that report in year 5. We'll have comprehensive, guides for when we get there for how to handle that. But for right now, we really just want to make sure folks understand how to complete this template and where these courses need to be. So the biggest development here is that when you are completing this template, you need to keep closing that loop in mind. And thinking back to that previous example for English, right? If I'm only assessing it once every 4 years, how am I documenting any of those improvements? The best way to document that improvement will be to assess that course every year. It is something that is absolutely necessary. It is something that, in order to demonstrate that we are building that culture of assessment, that we are fostering this cyclical assessment cycle, we are evaluating these courses every single year. So, for example, if you have a course that is only ever offered in the fall, it has to be assessed every fall. If you have a course that is only ever offered in the spring or the summer, it has to be assessed in the spring or the summer. It's possible that your department or your program won't do any assessing in the summer. It's possible that you assess 3 or 4 courses. It kind of just depends by department or program, but every course has to be assessed every single year. So the new template looks like this. You can see year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4 broken down by individual semesters. This way, you're not looking at one gigantic list of every single course, and instead looking at it at the individual sections in which you would ultimately assess those courses. So what are you assessing in fall? What are you assessing in spring? And what are you assessing in the summer? One thing I really want to emphasize is that each year needs to look exactly the same. There will be no deviation. You're not going to have year 1 and year 3 are the same, and year 2 and year 4 are the same. They won't be in those individual categories like that. Everything is going to be the same. So, for instance, if you want to see a completed example, here is the English department's, their first page of their course assessment cycle, and it says part 1 here, but ultimately year 4 looks exactly the same as years 1 through 3 as well. So, in fall, we assess English 101 and English 095, and in spring, we assess English 102, English 131, and English 201. Assessment may be conducted on individual courses if necessary in the summer, but as of right now, we don't have any plans for that. And in thinking about courses like English 101, that course is offered in the fall, in the spring, and the summer. We, as a department, decided when we wanted to assess it. That is entirely up to you. If you have a course that is offered every semester, or at the very least both fall and spring, you can pick one. That's fine. Wherever it is entirely up to you, but it has to be assessed every year. Every year, just like this example, needs to look exactly the same. Otherwise, how do we document that loop is closing? How do we document those improvements? We know that faculty are doing it. We know that everybody's doing really cool stuff. We hear about it all the time during in-service or faculty council. But in the interest of accreditation and building that culture of assessment, we really need to do this thing consistently. Now, for the in-person sessions, what happened was that I'm Morgan, by the way. I don't think I formally introduced myself at the beginning of the video, but Sarah and I, Sarah Dick, one of our deans, we were both present at the in-person sessions to help instructors to help everybody put together their course assessment cycles. Keep in mind, even though this is a digital version, a recording of that session, you are still more than welcome to shoot me an email or to shoot Sarah an email and ask us questions about this process. We are more than happy to get you additional examples to answer your questions. If you want to meet one-on-one to go over this information, you are totally welcome to do that. We want to make sure that as these assessment processes, these assessment endeavors do become more robust over the next few years, that assessment support and access to communication that you guys have is also just as robust. So lots of different people to whom you can reach out, lots of resources that are available to you, etc. So if you need anything at all, please, by all means, let one of us know. We are more than happy to help you. So thank you so much for watching this video. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and best of luck putting together your course assessment cycle.